there's this like thing that keeps coming up with young people saying like, oh, you can tell a millennial because they're wearing these kinds of glasses versus
Right.
these kinds of glasses, or they're using the emojis in that way or that way. And there's all these like young people that make fun of millennials for how they use technology.
Yeah.
And then all the millennials get all anxious and they're like, oh, I'm going to like stop doing all this stuff. But it's like, what makes the young people's view of the world the default view that we should all like subscribe to? Like,
Exactly.
maybe I want to use full stops in my sentences on text message, and like that's fine.
I think that's
And,
fine. Yeah, I was
yeah,
raised like that. You put your punctuation in a sentence.
yeah. And I mean, part of me does want to also speak their language, and I know like with my younger reports, for example, or students, I did start to make a deliberate effort not to use full stops at the end of my sentences.
For real?
because they interpret that as you're angry with them. And like, because
Okay, you're kind of blowing my mind right now.
oh yeah,
That's considered rude.
it's not rude, they just think you're angry. Like,
If you put full stops in.
if you're writing a text message and you end it with a full stop, they think you're mad at them. And so their punctuation is enter. So you just write one sentence without a full stop and then hit enter, and then the next sentence is in the next message, and that's how they punctuate the sentences.
That explains things that I've experienced then.
But if you put a full stop, like, they think you're mad.
Oh, okay, that's important information.
Yeah, because I think that's how they use it, like to
mic
like
drop.
yeah. Oh, so yeah, so on one hand, are you writing this down?
I'm writing this down. No, I just realized my phone is not on silent. But if I'm getting this important information, I gotta write this down before I forget it. Gosh. Okay.
No, yeah. So on one hand, I don't think young people's view needs to be the default way, but at the same time, it is important to know how they communicate and how they understand you, so that you don't send signals you're not trying to send.
That isn't.
Oh, you need to like look this up. There's a whole like.
There's like an etiquette guide.
Yeah. There's an etiquette guide for text messages. And
so you're talking about, so when young people for you mean like how young?
Like 20 to 25.
Okay, so it's important for me because our students are 20 to 25.
Yeah, for sure.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not okay. So I'm not texting my students, but like on Slack, for example, I would have much younger people who were reporting to me, and when you send, like, I think this translates to when you're sending like Slack messages in like one-to-one conversations.
Okay.
That if you use
so
punctuations,
or Signal or WhatsApp or whatever.
Exactly.
You shouldn't be using full stops.
Well, depends who you're talking to. Because if you're talking to someone,
if you're talking to another Gen Xer, then it's fine, right?
Well, I'm not a Gen Xer. I'm on the cusp of millennial, but yeah, I guess.
Aren't you an honorary Gen Xer? Just checking, but I think so, right?
I do think that I'm on the border. But then if you're just sending messages one sentence at a time, they get like super annoyed because especially because Gen Xers have ring like sounds on their phone, because all the young people have the sounds turned off, right?
Really?
Yeah, everyone has their phone on silent.
Man, I'm finding out I'm old.
Old people have ringtones, and so it's super annoying when it goes bing, bing, bing.
Exactly this,
bing.
Yeah. Okay. So you're really explaining the world to me here. This is.
How do you not know this?
Well, I don't know. It's just you get to a certain age, and then you stop paying attention.
Yeah.
You think you have it all figured out, right?
I think it's worthwhile to just like look up how
I think that's important.
How the people who are your students, how they see the world. It doesn't mean you have to subscribe to that, but just to understand.
It's kind of basic human respect is the way I would translate this. If you don't respect the conversation conventions of the group that you're with, then either you're going to be insulting people, or you're going to be hurting people's feelings. Yeah. Or you're going to be ostracized.
And which like, it's your right to insult people.
It is,
but you should have control over when you're doing that or not. Yeah.
Gosh, okay. So I really learned something valuable today. This is an important conversation.
Excellent.
And so does that mean you change your communication style depending on who you're with?
Depends. Oh, like in person or like
no, on text messages to say or whatever.
I think so. I think so. Yeah. Right. I mean, I don't really text with that many people, but I would say I adapt my conversation style to
Because to be clear, I was taught in high school how to write a letter. And they sat us down in English class, and they said, a letter starts like this: Dear
Mm-hmm.
X. Then there's this first sentence: I am writing to you because you have the address at the top left and the target address at the top left and your address at the top right,
Right.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Yeah.
Yours faithfully, yours
Yeah. Yeah.
sincerely,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
write your name. And I was like, okay, now I've learned the rules. Now I've got this communication thing settled. And like,
Yeah.
I'm writing all my messages this way. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In my emails. And someone told me like a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, yeah, your emails are always so polite when you write to us. I was like, but that's how you write, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess it also, yeah, sometimes the uh, letter format translates to email, but sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I do think younger people should also learn how older people write. Like I know professors who get these pretty rude emails, like "Dear Prof," and no punctuation,
Yeah.
and like kind of demanding stuff. And it's like, again, I mean, maybe that you don't care, but I feel like a lot of younger people don't know that really puts them on the bad side of the
It
professor.
certainly
And
does, yeah.
then professors are people as well, and they're going to it's
They
going to
have
affect
bias,
how they interact with
prejudice,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe then next time you want an extension on something, you're less likely to get it.
Sadly
So,
true, I
yeah.
must admit. I would like to say that, oh, no, we're above that kind of thing. But of course, if you're kind of irritated and
Yeah.
time poor,
Yeah.
then if you've got 3 emails and one of them is kind of a little bit less,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of triggers you a bit more, then you might put that down the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, and I don't think it's like that if you don't like a student, you're going to be nasty to them.
No.
I think it's just that you're not going to go above and beyond if you don't like feel fondly for them. But if like they're a student that's been trying really hard, and you can see that in many ways like they've rubbed off well on you, then if they need something, you're going to go out of your way to help them.
It's certainly the
Otherwise,
case,
you
yeah.
just
Yeah.
go by the rules and don't go out of your way.
So it's kind of amazing to be sitting next to you after the last time. I was thinking about it. I'm pretty sure the last time we met was in London
Yes.
at Sean Barrett's.
Yes.
Was that a memorial service?
I think it was 1 year later.
One
it was
year
a
later,
conference to
yeah.
commemorate 1 year later.
And when
Yeah.
was that? That was 2000 and
Like maybe 12 or 13. 2012 maybe.
2012.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been nearly 13, 14 years.
Because Sean died either my first year or second year in Canada. So that would have been like 2011 or 2012. It was probably like 2011. And then we would have been at the memorial 2012.
2012. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, okay. What's funny is that, so Sean, okay, I don't know like whether we want to talk about this, but
it feels kind of right to me that we might
yeah.
talk about Sean.
Yeah. So I knew Sean probably a long time. Well, I don't know. What's funny to me is that we knew Sean independently.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there was like almost no overlap between like when I knew Sean and when you knew Sean.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was almost like funny when I found out that you guys like had been working together. Because
it was very strange. I was speaking to him like, what? You know Sean?
Yeah. And so then it was interesting because I guess prior to that, I hadn't seen you since the University of Queensland days.
That would be the case, yeah.
I don't know, like 2004 or something.
Yeah, so 2003 is when I left Australia.
Right. So 2003 was the last time I saw you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then after that, I got to know Sean. You got to know Sean completely independently. And then we saw each other at his the 1 year commemoration of his very tragic death.
Indeed, yeah.
In London.
Very shocking and tragic death. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if do we want to talk about the death or the life?
I think the
or
life,
our fondest memories.
Because for me, Sean was one of these people who influenced me. Right. You can't say that about everyone in your life. Right. He literally influenced my worldview. And I think about him a lot, right? Even to this day, when I do certain things, I can just imagine what he would say. And that's when someone stays near you, alive or having passed. That means that I think that means that they're important to you. And so Sean was important to me. Is still important to me, and I think it's worth reflecting for me personally on how he influenced my life and why that was so positive. And I'm sure you have sort of a very complementary, or different, interesting.
Before we dive into that? Do we want to tell the viewers a little bit of background about who Sean even is?
Yeah,
Or,
I think that makes sense,
okay.
right? So the thing is, I don't have his CV in my head.
Yeah.
So I'll tell
His
you.
name is Sean Barrett. For
Sean
starters.
Barrett is
Sean
the person
Barrett.
we're talking about. I met him. I'll start because I guess I met him earlier than you did. Could that
Really?
be? So I met him in 2003 or earlier.
Oh yeah, then you would have met him earlier because I
Yeah.
met him after you left, and then he was visiting.
Right.
University of Queensland.
So I moved. We got to rewind the clocks back to 2003 when I moved to the UK.
Okay.
And so I was just finished my PhD with Michael Nielsen, and this is my first postdoctoral position in Bristol. Bit of a culture shock moving to England. I was not real used to life in England. And Sean Barrett was just finished his PhD or doing it. I'm not sure. Maybe it was his first. No, he must have finished his PhD, and he had his first position at Toshiba in Bristol. And the world of quantum in Bristol was very, very small then. I mean, Bristol's a major player now, but back then there was like 3 people who had any interest in quantum anything. And Sean was one of them. And so naturally you find each other pretty quickly through the university. And we would like go to the pub and hang out and stuff like that because our common, the basis for our relationship was that we were both studying quantum stuff. And so we'd often meet at the pub like every Friday in the UK. We'd be pretty normal. You'd head to the pub and we'd hang out and talk about stuff, mostly quantum stuff at the time. And he was a theorist, but he's one of these very special people who I treasure, the theorist who can speak to the experimentalist, and further, the theorist who treasures the experimentalist. Right? And so very early on, he made it clear to me that it was of value to be respectful of experimentalists and that experimentalists had important and interesting things to say. And so that's why he had an influence on me early and powerfully. And it was around that time, 2003, 2004. And then we keep bumping into each other because he moved on, I think, then back to King. I don't know where he moved after.
He was in at Imperial at the end. He was at Imperial, but
that must have been.
But I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Where?
Yeah, because I bumped into because I was always commuting to London and meeting with people because Imperial was where quantum was really happening in 2004, 5, 6, and so I always would go there because they would come to Bristol. And so I'd be bumping into him just regularly all the time. We'd be like, oh yeah, what's going on and so on. And so we would always talk about what we were interested in. And through him, I met Tom Stace, ironically, an Australian I met through a British guy. But
I probably met Sean through Tom.
Right, yeah. So Tom Stace and Sean, I think, were like really, really close for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And they had this very shared worldview.
Yeah, so Tom Stace is a professor at the University of Queensland, but at the time, I guess he was a postdoc.
He was a postdoc in, gonna say Cambridge at Damned.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I remember meeting Tom at Cambridge, I believe. And maybe Tom will hear this and correct this in the comments.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
I saw Tom like three months ago.
Really?
In Brisbane.
How's he doing?
Yeah, he's great. He's got a company.
Yeah, I know he's got a company. And the company's going well.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, wow, that's great. Yeah. I knew that was his ambition for a while.
Yeah, it seems like he's having fun figuring out like how. I mean, I think he was always like pretty embedded in the real world, non-academic world anyway. But I think he's having fun learning about all the startup stuff and how it's going. Yeah.
It can be fun. Yeah. But my Sean anecdote is coming to an end actually because we had loads of conversations, but he had a couple of zingers that he would always hit me with that would keep me real. And I remember the one that hit the hardest, and I'll relate it here. We were in some talk and we're talking about error. So the speaker was talking about error correction, and then about how it was at Coogee. We were at Coogee together one time, and he.
I would go to Coogee.
I never saw you at Coogee.
We always that's sad because I think probably when I most got to know Sean was one of the Coogee.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, insert bracket, Coogee is the most amazing conference in all of quantum computing, in my opinion. I would, everyone gets a bit nervous towards the end of the year. They're hoping they get the invite to go to Coogee. And extraordinary, beautiful place, wonderful people. The conference format is amazing. A couple of talks in the morning.
And then free time.
And
on the beach.
On the beach. And the weather's amazing. The people are really fascinating. Like people really relax and they really exchange ideas. And it's all sort of in this completely informal setting. My favorite conference. So it was one of these, and someone's giving you a talk about error correction, and then and then it dawned on me, oh, well, when you do error correction, you have to measure. And when you measure, then you have some information. You have to destroy that information sometimes. And then I was thinking about, I knew a bit about this Landauer erasure principle, and that this costs a little bit of energy um, uh, to erase information. I was thinking, wouldn't that warm up the qubits? And I asked this question. I said, have you thought about the Landau erasure? And then Sean turns to me and says, "Shh, bullshit that theorists say." So that one was particularly good because he understood that this was total bullshit. To worry about the cost of erasure of a one bit of information versus the thermal budget in an error correcting chip. And it brings you, as a theorist, you could quickly become detached from reality very, very quickly. You start theorizing about things and you don't look at an experiment. But Sean kept it real.
Yeah, okay. I remember he always tried to convince me about the beauty of numerics. I was always one of these people, numerics, I don't really like numerics, but I wanted to do analytical stuff.
Because that's cool, right?
Yeah. And he was like, numerics is really beautiful. And later on, I also discovered, and now I have a stronger preference for numerics than analytics. But I guess maybe it must be because of the Tom Stace connection. But eventually, I guess after wherever Tom was in the UK, he moved to University of Queensland, and I think he must have been a postdoc there when I was a student. And so Sean Barrett would at least twice, but maybe 3 times, would visit for several months over the summer. So I got to know him during this time.
Right.
And I think either the first or second time I met him was at a little house party in those like long-term residences, and
right,
David Poulin. Do you remember David
Poulin? Yeah, also sadly passed. Yeah,
also sadly passed away. Yeah, so I think it was his little residence, and there was a house party, and I remember it was like a crazy. David had a guitar, and he was playing, and he was like playing so crazy that eventually I think he must have cut his finger on the strings, and then like blood was like spurting everywhere while he's like going crazy. So that was one of my early fond memories of Sean. And then one of the other ones was at Coogee. Andrew Doherty, another professor in the field, he broke his arm while swimming.
You went to that one. Yeah, this is a famous one, right?
And actually, I remember Andrew. This is a trigger warning, but Andrew White described the break as if you got a carrot and twisted it. So it was like some like really nasty fracture. And I remember someone and I went to visit Andrew Doherty in the hospital.
Right.
And then I remember walking back from the hospital down that road that like leads to the beach.
Yes.
And then this like car drives past and like stops, and like there's like 4 physicists in this car, and like Sean Barrett like puts down the window and he like says hi or something, and I'm like, where are you going? And he's like, we're off to build a quantum computer. And then the car drives off.
Oh man.
So I think he was one of the few, because that was around the times that a lot of people wrote in their grants that, we're doing all of this stuff in support of quantum computing, but really nobody believed in quantum computing at the time. They just wanted to do foundational physics, and this was a great way to kind of get funding for this. But he was one of the few people in those days that genuinely wanted to build a quantum computer and believed 100%. That we could do it.
Yes.
And this makes me so sad now that
he didn't get to see
that
it.
he didn't get to see it. Like we actually have them now, and he didn't get to see it.
Yeah, he kept the faith. Like I lost the faith. I openly admit it. Somewhere around 2000. When I moved here was 2010. So already I'd certainly lost the faith by the time I moved here.
Yeah.
I'd moved into many body physics because you could just get easier results that way than waiting for quantum computers to be built. But man, Sean kept the faith, Tom kept the faith, and they just doggedly worked slowly, step for step, towards realizing a quantum computer. And they had such a good view of what technologies would be promising and weren't promising, and how to, what were the advantages, disadvantages. And I could always rely on Sean to like translate that for me. What what would be a serious player, what wouldn't. They certainly recognized early on that measurement-based schemes would be profound. The work of Robert Elsendorf and Hans Briegel was 2000, year 2000. And when I was doing my PhD, this stuff came out, and it was like, that's a weird curiosity. Who cares about this? This is silly. You can do computing with measurement, whatever. And then I met Sean, and Sean was like, don't you see how important this is, right? You can really do measurements easily, and preparing a one-shot resource state that you can do non-deterministically in the background. He understood this in 2004, 2003. And then I was, that reoriented my total worldview. And I understood from then that measurement-based quantum computing would have a role to play. And it really does. I mean, throughout all hardware schemes, we know it's coming.
I think the last time I saw him was in 2008 when I was visiting here in Germany, actually, in Erlangen, Christina Silberhorn's group. And so I was there for 3 months. It was my first kind of long-term academic visit. And the group was like fantastic. Everything was like really, really great. But I found like after a couple of weeks, I started to get incredibly lonely and very depressed. And the weekends were very difficult because I don't know, I was just like used to always having people around me that I could, either family or whatever. And so I was surprised how quickly you could get depressed from loneliness. And
it's real, yeah.
So, and I remember chatting with him. That used to be back in the days of GChat on Gmail, remember? So we would frequently exchange messages on GChat. And I was talking about how depressed I was. And he was like, let's go on a weekend trip together somewhere. So we booked a weekend in Amsterdam. And it must have been like still some way in the future, but having this like thing to look forward to. And then eventually, we met up in Amsterdam and like hung out, and it was like a really like fun time. And then I think that was the last time I didn't see him until, well, I guess because that was a couple of years later that he had that tragic car accident.
Certainly not his fault.
No.
But that's interesting that you mentioned this about how quickly loneliness. I mean, this is a very, very interesting pivot. I think that we could go on right now, and I'm happy to go on this because it plays such an important role in your productivity and your creativity. You can, when you move countries, it's profoundly lonely. It's profoundly lonely. You go outside of your full support network, and you get dumped somewhere else, and you don't know anyone. And I mean, I don't know, but I think most physicists aren't that great at socializing. It's a generalization, I know, but I think probably it resonates with a lot of physicists. It's a bit hard to meet people, right, as a physicist. You can't meet normies, right, because they'll just say, if you tell them you're a physicist, then you get one of 5 answers, right?
Yeah. I hated. I was bad at physics at school. Or you must be smart.
You must be really smart. And I love physics at school.
Oh, you get that one?
Yeah, sometimes you get that one. Yeah.
I've literally had someone just turn around and walk away.
What the?
Yep, like at a party. Like, I think like getting drinks or something, like, oh, what do you do? Physics. Walk away.
I mean, and so you're lonely, right? You get dumped in this new place, and you're lonely. Maybe it's your first postdoc, and you can't really make friends. And people in your group, I don't know, are they competitors when you're a postdoc?
Okay, I never thought about that, but interesting that because people do bring up this thing about academia being very competitive, and I guess I was so clueless. Well, that's probably why I lost it. but I never. But anyway, I don't want to have a.
But it's a good counterpoint, right? I wasn't completely comfortable with all the people I met in all the groups, and one of the reasons is some of them were quite competitive. I didn't feel competitive myself, but they brought that energy to the space, let's say. And there you are, and then you're probably jet lagged, and you're dealing with like stupid shit, like registering your bank account or something, and it takes weeks. It's just weeks. All the stupid shit you have to sort out when you move a country, and things aren't in the supermarket where you think they should be. And
the cognitive load of doing grocery shopping in a store where you're not familiar with the brands and the locations is like outrageous.
Enormous, yeah.
Like,
you can be exhausted, and I remember you just come home at 5 p.m. and I'm so exhausted, and you just fall asleep.
Yeah.
And even if it's an English-speaking country, I mean, Yeah,
Yeah.
it's non-trivial.
And even with food, like even if you want to prepare your own meal that is, like familiar, something you've cooked at home, the ingredients always have such subtle differences that
Yes,
the thing you prepare in the end is like it doesn't taste the same.
it's different.
Like the
Yeah,
milk is a little bit different, the flour is a little
yeah,
bit different.
100%.
It's like really
And
weird.
nobody
Yeah.
kind of ever tells you this, or at least nobody
Mm.
told me. I don't know if they told you, but
No, no, no.
and I was absolutely shockingly unprepared
Yeah.
in my first move to the UK. And it's what Sean sort of his ghost sort of
Right, right,
is
right.
there
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And there I was in Bristol in the middle of winter. I wasn't even prepared for the fact that days had different lengths.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
In Australia, it's always like 12
Yeah, yeah,
hours all
yeah,
the
yeah,
time,
yeah.
and miserably cold, and nothing worked, and the food it didn't taste right, and I was exhausted all the time
Mm-hmm.
for weeks and weeks and weeks, and my productivity was zero for at least 3 months, like absolutely rock bottom zero. I didn't do a single thing in the day except try and find another rental property and
Mm-hmm.
all this stupid stuff. And nobody prepares you for that. And what you should be told is you got to give yourself a bit of grace.
Mm-hmm.
Every move, every move costs you at least 6 months. Is my kind of
Yeah,
formula.
yeah, yeah.
Give yourself a bit of grace, because if you don't, then you're miserable instantly, right?
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the challenges of doing multiple postdocs is that you lose that 6 months adjusting, and then 6 to 12 months before you make the next move, you have to now focus on
Exactly.
getting
Yeah.
the next job. And so
Yeah.
what, you have like 6 months to be productive, and
Yeah.
how
And
are
the
you
pressure
supposed
is
to?
is
Yeah,
ramping up over those
yeah,
first
yeah,
6 months,
yeah,
because
yeah,
you're not
yeah.
doing anything. And nobody, I feel that that's not talked about very much.
Mm,
The cost of moving is,
yeah,
it's always
yeah.
romanticized. Oh, I'm going to Caltech, or
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. And then also the financial costs, because like postdoc salaries are okay. Like
mm,
maybe they're not great compared to like tech salaries, but in the grand scheme of things, if you look at what the average person in the country earns, like they're pretty good salaries.
yeah,
But the problem is that if you have to, like, every time you move, buy a whole new like set
yes.
of like kitchen things and like sheets and whatever, like, because are you going to be packing all of your dishes and like forks and knives?
And
But
even if you do, you have
yeah,
to wait until they
yeah,
come
yeah.
from a ship, right?
And so buying all that stuff over and over again, definitely, I think,
Yeah,
adds up, and you're not putting away money for your future. And
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I used to actually I used to think about this, like, that it would be cool, especially at Perimeter, where there were just like so many postdocs just
Hmm.
going through, to have some kind of like room that was like dedicated to just like having household things like plates and bowls and
That's
stuff,
a
and you
great
come
idea.
in and you
Yeah.
borrow the stuff for 2 years and then like put it back, so that you're not constantly having to buy new stuff. And
Wow, that's
yeah,
actually an amazing idea.
but I don't know if the logistics would be worthwhile, and everyone has different like tastes
I mean,
and
people do, but you kind of make do pretty quickly,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
We certainly had a kind of informal system here for a while, where we had enough turnover in staff and people coming in, that there was this kind of common property of dishes and
oh
plates and
yeah,
things that
interesting,
were stored
interesting.
in our meeting
Yeah,
room,
okay.
and then people would take these things and then
And
put
then
them
yeah, yeah,
back, and
yeah,
then and then there would
yeah,
be kitchen stuff, because in Germany they had the stupidest thing. Like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard
yeah.
of, and you probably ever heard of if you're not German. When you move into a place, there is no kitchen
I
in it.
found this out
Yes,
yesterday, which was just crazy.
it doesn't make
Crazy.
any sense at all. But when a German person moves out of their property, they take the kitchen, cabinets, basins, it goes. You're left with
Yeah.
with an empty room with like pipes hanging out of the
Yeah.
wall.
Wild.
It's wild to me. And we're not talking about big houses or something.
Yeah,
No, we're
yeah.
talking about like students who move from a
Yeah.
from
So imagine
small,
you come from Australia and suddenly you have to spend, I don't know, I don't know how much a kitchen costs, $5,000, $10,000
in
on
that on that order.
on
Yeah,
a new kitchen.
yeah.
Yeah, that sucks.
Of course, there is a
Yeah.
solution. There are lots of secondhand kitchens that you can
Yeah, yeah.
buy, but nevertheless,
But also, who wants to think about installing a
this is
kitchen?
ridiculous. Yeah,
That's something you think about when you buy a house, when you're an adult. No.
exactly. And then when you
Yeah.
look at what a kitchen is, these cabinets, it is just the same as installed cabinets in a bedroom or something like
Yeah,
that. Like,
yeah.
why did they pull those things out, but
Yeah.
not the?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think if you want to think about it logically, there's nothing weird about it, but I'm just not used to it.
Yeah, and
Because
nobody.
yeah,
And when you go to a country and you're not used to these
yeah,
things, it's these kind of shocks that
yeah,
hit you week after week.
yeah. That's what I find this, like, when I'm in Canada, and I guess when you're not in the very international perimeter bubble, and you're just talking to people who are outside, who are, most of them are just Canadians who have grown up there. Sometimes they say things like, "Oh, I can't believe like these people from this country are putting out their garbage like in this way, right? And it's like, well, maybe they don't know. And then the response is like, how can you not know? That's obvious. And it's like, yeah, you haven't lived in other countries. There are just so many
unwritten
things
rules
that are just so bizarre. And I'm sure if these people went and lived in Japan, there would be like breaking so many social social faux pas. And that's one good thing about living in many different countries, is that it kind of humbles you and makes you not take for granted.
Exactly, yeah. But the subtext here of this whole conversation is like, I think you have to calculate this when you're planning a career.
Right.
And I try and tell the people I'm responsible for when they're about to make a move, like, be aware you might get sick more often for a while. Just don't get angry at yourself. Everyone goes through this. It's cool. It's fine. And the loneliness, I think, is what triggered me, because that's one of the most profound damaging factors. Like your mental health can really be smashed within a couple of weeks. It's very, very quick, as you said.
I think it was even harder for people who made the move during the pandemic.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So at this conference I was at last week, there was a session on career paths afterwards. And so there were three, after I gave my talk, there were three alumni speakers like that used to be part of this center, and then they went on to do other things. And 2 out of 3 had a timeline of, the start of their career to now, and they had, a graph that was plotting some metric of satisfaction.
Oh, right, yeah.
But both of them had like very clearly indicated this was when COVID was, and like it was a very predominant part of their narrative at how difficult it was moving jobs, starting a postdoc, starting a PhD. I think both of them started their PhDs like during COVID in a new country. And
that's nuts.
That must have just been such an incredibly traumatic experience, because it would have been similar to my move to Germany, but then nobody could tell you, hey, let's go like hang out on a little like holiday, because nobody was allowed to move, and there was no one to hang out with in the town.
I was incredibly privileged that I had during the pandemic a house with enough space.
Yes.
And that way I came to less damage, let's say. But oh my gosh, these poor people. It's a real thing. Like, I still see this. Did I tell this story in any podcast? Maybe not. There's this. What also happened is that common knowledge got deleted during the pandemic. And
like, you mean institutional knowledge
institutional
in the lab?
Knowledge in the lab. Institutional knowledge got absolutely annihilated. And the example I'll tell, if I haven't told it before, you can cut it if I
doesn't matter.
Is here in Germany we have the system where we do oral exams. We've talked about that for sure. And what happens is the students exchange with each other, and they share knowledge about how an oral exam works and what you need to know. And they even have lists of professors and how they do the exams and what the professors like and what they don't like. And this knowledge is shared, and was. And then the students will come to the oral exam. They're nervous, right? But they've had this extra background knowledge shared with them with their colleagues,
right?
And then they know roughly how to prepare for the exam. And as a professor, you just sort of don't think about advising them on how to prepare, because they always turn up prepared, right? And then after the pandemic, something weird started happening. So first, the pandemic ends and we're doing oral exams again, and it was all fine. And then a year passes, and then I get the student come in, and usually I'll give, the average grade we give in an oral exam is somewhere kind of near the top 20%, because anyone who takes an oral exam is already like, they're primed, and they're going to come in and do usually a good job. And then all of a sudden I got people getting like 5%, really not failing, but like just absolutely nosediving, crashing in the oral exams. And I was so baffled. And it happened once, it happened twice, it happened 3 times. And then I started asking, how did you prepare for the exam and so on? And they said, oh, I didn't know how to prepare. And I was like, but didn't you ask your friends? Oh, I don't have any friends.
Right.
And it's like these people, pandemic has ended, and they don't have any friends. And I was, oh my gosh, I got to do something about this. So now, I give a long lecture about what happens in an oral exam.
That's interesting. Do you think the other professors are doing that as well? No. Okay.
No. But everyone, we all know this Corona-Welle, they called it, the wave of Corona victims, and they just finished coming through now, I would say.
Right.
So because it takes 3 or 4 years for them to get through. And so they'd started their undergrad in the end of the pandemic, and they didn't have any lectures in person, so that it was all done online for them. They had not met anyone else. They had no friends from 2000 and let's say 22 until 25. It took so long.
It's really, really difficult. Yeah.
And I think it's whenever there's a benefit, a financial benefit for people who talk about the corona delay or whatever. I think it's still not enough, but it's something, right? We get compensated a little bit. Some people do, luckily.
So I wanted to ask you a question that's sort of along these lines. But when you go to conferences, do you hang out with people roughly in your age group, career level, or do you go out of your way to hang out with the students?
That's thank you for asking that question. Okay. What do I do? What do I do? Okay, the first thing is I haven't been to a lot of conferences recently because travel gets harder. I try and, people, the problem is your friends. Mm-hmm. And typically when you go to a conference, you will be kind of hanging out with your friends. You haven't seen them for a while.
Exactly,
so you go like, oh, what's been going on? And so you try and catch up. Mm-hmm. But I'm also profoundly aware, because I remember very, very vividly and very painfully as a student, how hard it was to meet anyone. Okay, you meet other students, but you're looking for mentors, role models, advice, or whatever. And I remember, right, I really wanted to talk to this or that professor because they did work I was interested in or something like that. And I found it so hard to walk up to them and say, hi there, can we talk about this? And so I try and make an effort to talk to younger people.
Okay, I think that's really good.
But we're not on the socializing level anymore. To be clear, I think conferences are quite tricky places socially for students because how close do you get to a senior person, and it can be dangerous territory.
Okay, so I kind of want to comment on this. Actually, now which direction do I want to go in? Okay, one thing I want to say. Okay, so last week I was at this conference.
Right, maybe you can tell what this conference was, because I don't know what it was.
Actually. So it was a conference organized by MCQST, which is the Munich Center for Quantum Science Technology.
Yep.
Some conglomerate.
I've been to one of these. So,
yes. Yeah. And I was actually invited to not the conference, but to the 2-day summer school that was before the conference.
Right. Okay.
And that was more aimed at PhD students. And I gave a talk on careers in quantum, which is actually on YouTube.
Okay, you have a video?
Yeah. Well, I haven't. Well, they put it up. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm a little bit anxious promoting it until I watch it, which might be a few weeks. But this video exists. And then there was a little panel that I was on, and then the next morning I gave a 3.5-hour workshop on something called informational interviews, which I can talk about later as well.
Okay, that sounds really fascinating.
But so it was, the first 2 days was PhD students, and I was at all the coffee breaks and everything hanging out with the PhD students. And then came the 3-day scientific part of the program, and a whole bunch of new people showed up. The professors showed up, and they let me stay for the whole week, which I thought was really nice. That's cool. I was like, okay, I haven't been to academic conferences for a while. It'll be interesting to check this out. And I don't know whether it was because I think half of me, I was just used to hanging out with the students. Half of me was like, if they're having me stay at this workshop for this time, I should contribute something in return. Yeah. And so I thought it was really important to spend every break talking to a different group of students, sharing life experience and everything. And so I was doing this, and I very quickly noticed that the new batch of professors that had arrived, they were all just hanging out with each other at every single break, bar a few small exceptions. And at first I was like, oh my God, like this is so bad. I was imagining a different world where like a student goes to this conference and has like 5 separate conversations with 5 different professors about life and about their careers and everything, and how valuable that would be. But at the same time, like I thought back to my experience when I was in academia. Whenever I went to conferences, I was just so excited to see my friends from my PhD days and just wanted to catch up. And I kind of just wasn't really like, thinking about the students as much as I was at this conference. And I'm not saying that at this conference it was particularly bad or anything. It wasn't. It was just, everyone was acting the same way that they act at all conferences. It's just that I kind of had a different perspective this time, and it was kind of sad for me.
it is that way, I fear. It's kind of easy to explain, right? I'm not going to apologize for the professors, but I am going to explain the situation. It's quite exhausting to be on during a conference, and if students are coming to you, like when you're with friends, right? There's a certain degree of easygoing relaxedness, right? You don't have to be on the whole time. You don't have to guard your words or whatever. And then students come to you, and then you're looking for this kind of maybe more mentoring discussion and so on. You have to be a little bit more careful about how you interact with students. And being switched on like that the whole time can be exhausting for some of us. For me personally, very much. That doesn't mean that I don't want to do it, but yeah, it's just, it can be exhausting. And so it often has been the case that I will just flee, right? Because at some point you can't take anymore.
I think students can do something about this approaching the professors, but I find when they do that, it's usually going to be a conversation about the research. And I think what's missing is more of these life conversations, career kind of conversations. And I think it's hard to ask for those. They happen more naturally when you're sitting at a table, a bunch of students, one professor, and then someone asks a question, and then it turns into a conversation.
That can happen organically, often at the conference dinner, that you
if they don't all sit together.
If the professors don't all sit together, then you'll get a professor kind of stranded at a table with six. Stranded is not the right word, but they sit down, and then students sit down at the table around, and then fine, then that's a natural context and it works. But you have to make that happen by telling them professors not to sit next to each other, or you can engineer it as a student by sitting quickly down. This is true. Good advice. If you see someone you're interested in sitting at a table, overcome your social anxiety and immediately get down at that table. Even if it's surrounded by 4 other professors, even if you sit there passively just listening, you probably get something out of it.
But that's good advice.
But it is something I'm conscious about all the time, because once upon a time I got a compliment and it stuck with me. And I'm not very comfortable with compliments, but this one stuck with me. It's from a person who's quite well known now. I won't say who it is. And he came. I met him many years ago, and I knew this guy, and I had a kind of good opinion of him. He was a PhD student at the time, and several years later he became an established professor, quite well known, I would say. And he said to me all these years later, he says, "I just wanted to take the time to thank you for this conference where we met all those years ago, because you were the only person who spoke to me."
Wow.
He had sat next to another famous person who I'm not going to name, and this person had literally done the whole thing what you got. You're a physicist, turned away, and they just this guy had introduced himself, and this person just turned away.
That actually happened to me at this conference as well, from a professor.
Really?
Because who I guess was not interested to talk to me anymore because I wasn't a professor. So
Ouch.
It was like, whoa,
that's wow. Get off your high horse there. And apparently I didn't do that, and I was like, I don't remember not doing that. But I'm glad that I didn't, and that stuck with me, because I thought, I don't want to boast about it or something like that. Rather, it's a cautionary tale, right? As a professor, if you ignore someone now, a student who you think, they're not worth it for me, that person could be your colleague in not too long a time. And that person could have some power. In fact, the person I'm thinking of has quite a lot of power now.
Interesting.
And if you're an asshole to them when they're a student, they probably will remember.
Yeah. Although I wish you didn't even have to give that motivation.
Yeah, I wish not. Just be human.
Be nice.
Be nice.
People have feelings.
Yeah. I mean, I could see why, but you just get exhausted.
I know.
No, but okay, it's always worth the effort, in my opinion. But also, this advice goes for non-academia. So always I have this perspective of professors and academia and so on, but I am 100% sure moving country is a thing you do for startups. I'm 100% sure looking for mentors is something you do in the private sector as well, and that there are senior people and less senior people. I don't know, you can confirm this, or maybe it's a different world.
I mean, I can come back to Sean, for example. So Sean was a very dear mentor to me. He was, I guess, several years older, and so that was like very useful. That whenever I, wanted to understand how something works at a level that I haven't been at, it would be like you could ask for advice and everything. And so that was like really useful. And then when he passed away, that was just like a huge shock, because suddenly like I lost this mentor, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then a similar thing happened to me at IBM. I had a mentor there for quite a while, and he was like very supportive and everything. And then he left, and then also that was like also quite a shock. It was like, oh wow, I'm now on my own having to navigate this thing. And
right. Yeah.
I am not sure if he listens to my podcast, but he probably knows who he is.
Right.
But yeah, that was they had a very strong impact on me, and yeah, leaving made it very difficult. But yeah, so and I guess my point is that then I actively tried to find more mentors within IBM. I spoke to my manager, got her to introduce me to various senior
right.
people, which is okay. So this is something you can do. You can actively ask someone. Like if you're a student, you can go to your professor and say, "Can you recommend some mentors? I would like some, senior people in the community that maybe are not, my supervisor, right?"
Yeah, I like very much this question actually, and I think this is great advice for a student. Go to someone, a professor, and ask them who would you recommend to be a mentor for.
Yeah.
This is extremely cunning because it'll be a bit. It'll sting the professor a little bit.
No, but you shouldn't have like, the same as like your spouse shouldn't be your therapist, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you need to have someone who has an outside perspective.
That's true, of course,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, but it'll also prompt the professor to realize that this is important.
Oh yeah.
And maybe think that they should be doing something.
Oh,
as
mentoring
well.
other people.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I quite like it. It's a good question. I'll try and remember this and advise my.
Yeah. And in fact, this kind of brings me back to this informational interview
right.
thing
Yeah.
that I gave.
You promised.
The workshop on. So informational interviews. I guess you can describe this quite formally, but a lot of the time people do this organically anyway. But I guess when you're making a career change, you don't tend to find yourself in situations where you can talk to people who are in the career that you want to be in. So you have to be a little bit more deliberate about approaching people. But informational interview, you should Google it. It's essentially a 20-minute conversation you have with someone where the goal is for you to learn things about their career. So you ask questions like, what is your job like? What do you do day to day? What are your favorite things about your role? What are your things that you don't like about your role? Then you ask about their path, like how did you get your job? What do you wish you did differently, and so on. What skills did you have in your PhD that you found useful in your job? What skills did you need to learn, and so on. And then the final part is you ask them for advice, like, given what you know about me, what do you recommend that I do? Like, what are things that a manager would like about my past? What are things that they wouldn't like, and so on. So there's, and also, in general, what advice do you have? And finally, what other people do you recommend I talk to? So that then
That's
you
the power
get,
one. Yeah.
like branch out, right? And so the workshop was about how to conduct these kinds of these interviews. And then the precursor to that is, well, how do you find these people to talk to? And one of the ways that you can do it is to go to your PhD advisor and ask them, are there any students that you supervised or postdocs that you supervised that now went into industry and that you can connect me with and that I could have a chat with? Because when someone makes the connection, the person is much more likely to agree to having a conversation, and they're much more likely to be invested in doing a good job at that conversation. So I think being deliberate about finding people to talk to is really valuable when you're making a career transition.
Advice. It's critical advice. Yeah. That's really wonderful. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't know it's a thing. And it's a little bit weird when you describe how to do it because it seems very artificial and very formal. But in practice, you don't even go to someone and say, can I have an informational interview? You just say, can we have a coffee chat? It's just, and most people know these days that coffee chat doesn't mean you go and have a coffee at a cafe. It means you're just having a video chat.
Right, yeah.
And you don't have to go through this list mechanically like you're interviewing someone. But just having this list, knowing what are the kinds of questions that you could ask, and then you want to follow up with good questions after, so it's more like a conversation.
Right.
So yeah, actually, one of the feedbacks that I got from after this workshop was that they wish that they could see examples of how this looks, and because they want to know, like, is it really casual, is it really formal? And kind of I thought about this for a while, and my answer is like, Well, it really just depends
Yeah.
on the people. And I remembered something that a younger student, not in physics, but she was posting about doing these informational interviews, and the way she described it was, it's like your own personal podcast that
Right.
you're
Yeah.
and that you get to like ask these questions.
Yeah.
And I think this was a good analogy
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
because podcasts can be very formal, very structured like an interview, or they can be very organic, random conversations. And so it's hard to say to someone, how does a podcast look? It
Exactly.
really,
Yeah.
really depends, right? And so I think with the coffee chats, it's like this as well. It really depends on how you want to drive the conversation, whether you have good rapport with the person or whether, they're kind of shut off and will just give you one word answers. So I don't really know how to tell someone how they look. All I can say is just try a few and see how it goes
Yeah,
for
right.
you. Yeah.
Gain information. Gain information. So
Exactly.
if you don't know something, start to know something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
the only way you get to know something is if
Yeah.
you gain information by doing something. So
Yeah.
proactive information gathering is something I'd like
Yeah.
to push. So yeah, but it is like, I do acknowledge that for a lot of people, there's probably social anxiety is an issue in their lives in the natural sciences for various reasons. And it can be extremely challenging, extremely intimidating, especially if you don't know how a conversation is going to play out. Like, I can see where that question was coming from. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I start? How do I even write the email? And there is no one size fits all answer, as you said. But just like doing anything is better than doing nothing.
I agree.
So
Yeah.
even if you fail, like even if you have some failed information interviews, you will have gained information through the failure, and your reputation isn't burned because these people aren't going to gossip about you. They couldn't care less. Right?
Yeah.
Let's face it. They don't remember your name 2 days later. So you get to roll the dice a couple of times.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I think the other thing that people struggled with is like, why would someone say yes to having a conversation with me? And I find it, I don't know if I think that's a normal question, or to me it seems really abnormal, because I say yes to a lot of these conversations. I say no to a lot as well, just because for 5 years I've been telling everyone to have these conversations, and whenever somebody reads that, they're like, "Oh, I'll ask Aggie." Yeah. I'm like, "No, I can't.
This is not the point.
I can't talk to everyone." But when I do have these conversations, I find them just as rewarding as I'm sure the other person does, because you always learn something new. You always learn about what are the things that young people are struggling with, which is really important. Also, if you see someone who, clearly is going to just be a success, right? They just need to figure out some things. It's so exciting to just be part of that,
Right,
and then
yeah.
be able to watch them go off and do something. And another thing, for example, when I left academia, it was a very traumatic experience. And so then once I kind of figured out how to make that change, I really just like wanted to share that information with people. And I know a lot of people are in that same boat as well. So if you reach out to someone who recently moved, I'm sure they'd be very happy, just as part of their own healing process, to kind of talk to you.
Beautifully said.
So there's just, and I listed just a few, but there's a ton of human reasons that people would say yes to a complete stranger that's asking for 20 minutes of their time to help them with something.
100%.
So
and one you didn't mention is that humans kind of like talking about themselves.
They like talking about themselves. Yeah.
Most humans that I know do. Most.
Yeah.
Not all, but
actually, when I was doing that, okay, another thing you might want to look at is my Physicists in the Wild podcast from a couple of years ago. There I did these short interviews with people about their careers. They were almost like these informational interviews. And I definitely got a sense from some of them that it was a therapeutic experience for the person, that they kind of got to tell their story that they hadn't had a chance to tell. And it gave them an opportunity to reflect on their story, maybe which they hadn't reflected on. So so
that's awesome.
but humans do like to talk about themselves.
They just like to talk about themselves. In fact, it's a good algorithm for starting any conversation.
Yeah.
You just
tell me about yourself.
Tell me about your famous result. How did you get that?
Oh yeah. Exactly.
It sounds like a stupid question, but boy, they love to talk about it. It's really wonderful. I love this a lot, right? Because something floated out of my head.
Oh no,
it was really cool. It'll come back to me. But the idea of reaching out to people and building your network and trying again, I think that's because failure can hurt in a social situation, right? If you do have one of these mega awkward, this really didn't work kind of moments,
Yeah.
it can be hard to pick yourself up from
Yeah.
that and then
Yeah.
try again. But if you do, like it's a numbers game, right? It's not every discussion is going to go poorly. If you roll the dice 3 or 4 times, it's going to land up 5 or 6 eventually. And so I am sure, as long as you try
Yeah.
at least more than once, yeah, you'll
And the
gain
thing is,
something.
the rejection does sting. So first you have to go through the step of someone saying yes to you, and maybe like 9 out of 10 people
Maybe they don't
won't say yes.
Yeah.
A lot of them won't reply, not because they hate you, but because they just have a ton of things.
Yeah.
A lot of them might reply and just say, no, I don't have time to do that, because, you know, people learn to prioritize things. And so that can sting, right? And, you know, there's first the fear of rejection, then the feeling of rejection. And the thing is, it's okay to just like feel that and process that, and then pick yourself up the next day and try again.
It's a legitimate feeling, and you know, I don't want to make that you feel less legitimate. It's a natural feeling. You're allowed to experience it. And you know, sadly for anyone watching this podcast, I'm probably going to say no. In fact, it's got to the point where I get so many requests. My secretary answers some of these requests. If you want 20 minutes of my time, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, that you should,
nothing personal.
You should, when you're looking for these people to find, maybe don't go for the person that has the most public profile.
Yes.
Go for someone who maybe isn't posting a lot, but they have a very interesting story. You can see on LinkedIn, you can see their career history, and then, you know, maybe if someone hasn't had one of these meetings for a year, they would be really happy to have one.
Yeah.
But if somebody gets requests all the time, it's really hard to say yes.
It's sort of hard to say, but also like you're getting on these podcasts, and if you look at my social media presence, you get every piece of advice that I would tell you anyway. So all I'm doing is I'm turning into an old person who uses the same anecdotes over and over again. So I'm not the right person to talk to. But there are so many people who don't have a social media presence. Just to amplify what you said, I think even like boring people who don't have anything amazing in their LinkedIn profile, have no like major result, I think they can be some of the most interesting people that you meet, right? You can never know beforehand. And famous people can be a bunch of assholes. So it's like I would say I would almost actively advocate for reaching out to people who you pretty much haven't heard of, or because they will have a story they want to tell.
Yeah,
for sure,
I agree.
For sure.
I agree.
And famous people, they get so, you know, I know the feeling. I just tell the same stories over and over again. It's like,
and the problem with people who've told the story over and over again is that it's probably not a true story anymore.
It's changed,
because you've given so much thought to this story to make it have a good narrative that you've probably changed things like a bit
like
from
these
the
Feynman
reality
stories, right?
But if you tell the story for the first time off the cuff, then maybe you'll get a lot more, you know, truth.
I bet it's much more authentic. The first time you tell the story. Some stories land better when you talk to people. They just land better, and then you're like, oh, maybe I'll make it land a little bit better next time. And so you re-narrate your past, and it's a thing, right? You know, humans can actually re-narrate their memories, and then all of a sudden you're telling a story that didn't really happen. Apparently Feynman did this a lot. He practiced his stories until they landed properly.
They're good stories.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly they're sticky.
They stuck, but don't regard them as the truth.
Yeah.
That's a really great. I like this a lot. I'll recommend you have it's recorded, right?
No, so my talk about careers in quantum is recorded,
that's
but the workshop is not recorded.
Yeah, you can't really record.
What I'm thinking though is I want to create a online version of this workshop, which would be a series of emails that once a week you get an email with an actionable task.
Okay.
So the first one would be like, go through this process on LinkedIn and get a subset, you know, I have a spreadsheet, right? Fill out this spreadsheet of names and contacts and everything. And then, you know, the next one will be like, send out 10 of these messages. And maybe it's a 6-week series of weekly emails
you'll
that then
charge
make it
for
good.
this, right?
I will have to charge.
You have to
so
charge
this
for
is
this,
this is something that I struggle with a lot, because a lot of the career things that I do are aimed at PhD students, and PhD students don't have money. So I need to think about what is the appropriate way to charge it. But then, you know, what I realize now after like 9 months of trying to start a business is that I keep being pulled into all of this career related stuff. Some of it is because people are pulling me into it. Some of it is it just seems to be in me, and I keep going there.
Right.
But none of it has been financially rewarding at all. And since I'm trying to build out this other part of my business, which is this deep tech communication stuff, if I'm spending a lot of time doing the career stuff, it
You have to be
means that
compensated for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so I need to think about what's a good model. One thing I am thinking about though is maybe PhD students might not have their own money, but maybe if it's structured in such a way that it's like an extended learning thing,
Well, if it's
maybe
career development, yeah,
maybe an
we have
advisor has a bit of a
yeah,
budget that can pay for a
so
workshop
much
like
money
this.
like
Yeah.
this. So career
Yeah.
development funding is a thing, like in most countries. In Germany, it's
Mm-hmm.
certainly a thing. There's money always put aside for career development, and they typically people they get speakers in, and then
Mm-hmm.
students have the opportunity to go to workshops,
Yeah.
and the speakers will charge corporate rates, and corporate rates are like 2.5K
Mm-hmm.
per day or more, right? And so going that path is certainly fine. But I wonder about the following model. Like I learned this model from this entrepreneurial
Mm-hmm.
community that I'm also in touch with. You've heard about School, right?
School?
Skool.
I don't think so.
It's one of these online learning platforms, and you can
Okay.
have a subscription model,
Okay.
and you
Okay.
can put content on there in the form of like lessons and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
It
Okay.
costs a bit to get into it. Like I think the subscription fee is in the hundreds or something per
Like
year
as a user or as
as a
a
user. Yeah,
okay.
as
Mm.
you buy a license or a seat, and
Yeah.
then you can give your first school community. You create this little community,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's a subscription model, you could say, okay, to be part of this school community, you pay like Patreon, like
Mm-hmm.
€5
Mm-hmm.
a month or something.
Mm-hmm.
And people will come in, they may pay the €5 for 2 or 3 months, they get
Mm-hmm.
what they get out of it, and then they leave the
Mm-hmm.
community. And that way you're compensated for your for the content
Mm-hmm.
creation, which I think you have to people have to acknowledge, right? It just
Yeah.
that that costs time, and time is unfortunately money.
Yeah.
And then they feel good about it because they've spent some money on it. And there's a little community, right? You have a little community there.
Yeah. So I mean, so far I've given quite a few of these workshops around now, and all of them have been someone would cover my expenses to go and speak, but I haven't been charging speaking fees. But the one that I gave right now, this was the last one I'm going to do like that. And from
Yeah,
now on, if I do give any workshops, I will be charging speaking
I think you
fees.
should. Yeah,
And there are some opportunities to do this, but at the same time, I kind of, if I think about the long-term goal, what I really want to do is get away from charging for my time. I want to build up scalable businesses,
yeah.
and so I think the subscription online courses is a better way because
It's
once it's prepared,
it's passive
then
income.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
passive income. Yeah,
So
and for a lifestyle business, right? Passive income
exactly,
is
exactly.
is what you're aiming
Yeah, yeah,
for.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I like this, and I think also the paying for it. So I think it doesn't need to be a huge amount, but I think if you pay for something, you're more likely to then stick with it. Like if
absolutely.
you,
Yeah,
so many people are just like sign up for free courses, and I do this as well,
yeah,
and then they just don't do it because you're not invested in it. So I
yeah.
think even from the user perspective, it's good to have some kind of fee.
Exactly.
Yeah,
They'll have a better experience if
yeah,
they pay for it. It's weird, but it's true,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And humans are so weird in so many ways, right? And but that's one of them. And so I've spoken to a lot of people who've gone into this kind of passive. They make a couple of products, online products, which end up being videos you download, email sequences, and so on, and they sell them passively for a couple of euros, and then they have this constant passive income that goes on, and it's good content, and you don't feel bad about having created it because you did give your best, and people get value out of it that way.
Yeah,
I think it's a great thing. And otherwise, all this knowledge that you have is getting lost.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess one thing I was going to say earlier was that, like, to your point where you're saying that you're always just giving the same sort of advice. But I feel like what people are getting out of these meetings isn't the advice that they can get, online anyway. They're
Okay.
getting
Yeah.
something else, which is like someone just telling them that they'll be okay and that they believe in them. And like just so many conversations I've had where somebody comes in and is just like so depressed about their future. And we chat for 20 minutes. And I don't think I tell them anything particularly profound, but I can, based on their background, I know that they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And so then I think I just radiate confidence in their future, not deliberately, but just because I am confident in their future, because I see something that they don't, comparing where they've come from and what the world looks like. and at the end I think they just feel like so much better
They
that
feel
it's going to be
seen, right? Yeah,
okay.
seen and validated.
And I think
Yeah.
that's, yeah, you can't kind of, I think it's difficult to scale that.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. These school things also offer, maybe you could offer once a month an hour group call. Like,
Maybe.
yeah.
But also I think I'm not the only one that can provide that. Like
That's true.
you
Yeah.
can, like we were talking about reaching out to all of these other people. If you reach
Yeah.
out to somebody in some industry, they will probably see those things and also radiate confidence in your
Probably,
future.
yeah. So I learned a lot from that already. So I'm going to rethink about some of the things I'm doing. Informational interviews.
Yeah.
Because I'm stealing all this in order to apply it in my mentoring role.
Right.
Because I don't know what I'm doing as a mentor sometimes.
I think it's so wonderful that you're taking it seriously.
More than seriously. Like I feel like a weight of responsibility. Not because of the stupid tournament system that we're in academia. I know that most people aren't going to win this tournament, and I feel like some responsibility to them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be that guy who exploits the PhD students to do work and then dumps them at the end, that everyone complains about. But
so, kind of, let me ask you a question related to that. And it's related to something we kind of touched on last time about the incentive model of academia and research, and why does research even exist? Why do governments fund people to do research at a university and train PhD students? And so it seems like you could kind of identify different proportions. Like you can say there is some part of value is that we just inherently value that there are people in the world doing blue sky research. It's just good. The same way that we value the arts as a society, more or less, depending which society you're in. But there is some inherent value. Then there's the value that you might get 100 years in the future, like some scientific discovery. Most of them are going to be wasted, but something might lead to something in the future, like GPS or whatever. And so that's like some proportion. And then there's this thing that we were talking about, which is that you train a whole bunch of really smart people that then leave academia and then contribute to the GDP of the country. And maybe there are some other things I haven't identified. But my question to you is, assuming it's just those three, what percentages would you assign to each one? Because I think that should,
as what's really happening, or what should be happening?
No, as what's really happening, as why in practice governments choose to put money into universities and research institutes. Because I think the answer to that question then informs how a professor should be doing their job and spending their time to justify their job to the taxpayers.
Good point. So I'd say almost 0% for the fine arts.
You think so?
Okay. I don't think that's considered. I mean, it looks good maybe to the odd politician that they're funding blue sky research in the boasting to other politicians sense, but beyond that, I don't think it has they don't think in those terms. That's my feeling from interacting with politicians. But about the other two, so the other two are very interesting. The skilled work, upskilling your workforce for a relatively little amount of money. By the way, you don't spend very much on the professors, and you upskill so many people. It's like a huge multiplier. Versus the investment in risky research that will pay off, and when it pays off really good, right? I don't know what the percentage is. I mean, I guess I couldn't really give real numbers because I wouldn't even know where to research those numbers. But gut feeling, I think the upskilling the workforce thing is more in the 80% to 90%. I think that's where the money's going. Yeah.
Wouldn't that mean that the professor should be spending like 90%, 80-90% of their time on training the students?
Wouldn't it mean that? Yeah.
Not on the
on
research?
The research. Wouldn't it mean that? Yeah. Yes, it would.
Okay.
But I would say most of certainly my experimental colleagues are doing that, right? I don't know very many experimental professors who do research anymore.
Okay.
But what they do is they multiply the multipliers, right? So they have the overview of the history of science and the field and what's good, what's bad, and so on. And they advise the advisors. So the postdocs or the senior team members are the ones who really coordinate the research in an experimental physics group.
Right.
And they report directly to the professor, and the professor can very efficiently speak with the team leaders. The professors very seldomly talk with the PhD students. And so,
which is fine. Like if you have a model that propagates the information in a scalable way, that's
it's very efficient. And then in an experimental group, which is 20, 30 people sometimes, one professor can be upskilling 20 to 30 people in one go that way. Right. And I think that they're doing it.
Okay.
Theory is a bit different, right? Depends on the theory professor. So some of them just sit in their room by themselves and do research. But that's pretty rare, I would say.
Right.
Pretty rare. I mean, I know one or two, but usually they have a coterie of 3 or 4 PhDs, maybe some master students. So
because that's good to hear that that this happens in experimental groups. I'm because again, most of my experience is with theorists.
yeah.
But I wonder if, like, in the mind of the average theory professor, they break up the pie in a way that the first thing, the inherent value of doing something like this is like 60%, and maybe the possibility of some kind of future value is like 30%, and then the training the workforce for outside of academia, right? Not as a professor,
not as
but
a, yeah.
but given that most people leave academia, they think maybe that's like an after, maybe the training for an academic role is like 7%, and training for a non-academic role is like 3%.
Yeah,
it's like an afterthought, and I really feel like those ratios should be
I think it should be
skewed.
readjusted. I think it should be readjusted. Although I think it's happening. I actually think it's
the readjustment is happening.
Readjustment's happening in real time.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, I have this incredibly kind of biased view from quantum computing because I don't really interact with many other fields anymore. Not seriously, but within quantum computing, like every theory professor is very well aware that their workforce is ending up in the startup world. So we've realigned our priorities accordingly. I don't know, maybe the more traditional fields like condensed matter physics, soft condensed matter, they're monstrously large fields, but
I think those guys stay in at least on the postdoc level. But even for, I mean, that's the only field I know where people go from PhD to like faculty position. Like, I think those guys have a better chance of staying.
They're pretty good. Like if you're in condensed matter, then you usually have a more promising career path. High energy physics is, in my opinion, just so exceptional that it's hard to make a general statement about them.
Exceptional in what way?
There's not many of them. It's very famous.
Not many high energy physicists?
Not in proportion to the condensed matter.
Oh,
yeah.
Somehow I thought this was like a pretty...
one always gets the feeling that they're everywhere, right? But it's not actually true. Like if you look at any given university, any physics department, I don't think they're a majority high energy physics.
What about all the people that are working at the particle accelerators?
With that one exception, you, of course, CERN is a monstrous entity and employs many people, but not all of them are high energy physicists, right? They're working, they're engineers effectively, software or hardware engineers, quantum opticians, and so on and so forth. The people who actually theorize about new particles, the classical high energy physics thing, I don't think there's super lots of them.
I mean, you could be right. This is definitely not something I have looked up.
But they have a huge amount of mind share in the popular culture because maybe they're very good at marketing, or I don't know. You know, like everyone's heard of string theory, right? But not everyone's heard of soft condensed matter physics. But there's a lot of soft condensed matter physicists out there, right?
One thing I wanted to bring up was in the comments section. I don't know. Do you read the comments?
No, I do not.
No.
It's
Oh, actually, not that thing that I was going to bring. What I did notice is the latest video we posted was about the German Meisters.
Oh yeah.
That one.
The journeyman.
It had way more hits than any other video we've ever posted.
Oh, right.
And in fact, it was quite controversial last time I checked. There was 12 comments on there, people arguing about whether it's still real or not.
It's very real. I saw one last week.
Some people were like, this is bullshit. And then other people were like, no, they are real. And then just lots of going back and forth people. But I think it was also our first short where we got more than 50% of people watching rather than leaving.
Interesting.
Which is like, so apparently from my limited research, you have to get something like 80-90 to go viral.
Oh,
and usually ours sit around like 30%. This was the first one that went to 50%.
We were quasi viral.
Quasi
viral.
But it's like the only one that's not about physics or academia. So I guess we can see what are the interesting topics.
It's because I got the terminology, I think, slightly wrong. I'm not sure. I checked afterwards. I think Wanderjahr is not quite the right word.
No, someone did correct that. Someone did say that it's
it has a different name. But they are real. Aggie had made a post on LinkedIn just before coming to Hanover, saying maybe I'll see one of these guys. And I walked out of my home onto the train, and there was one of them on the train.
Funny. That's funny.
Really funny. I was like, they're real.
Well, I still haven't seen one. But the thing I was going to say is that on one of our videos, I can't remember which one, someone asked the question, "Are you going to take questions from the audience?"
Totally, yeah.
And I think that would be great. So if people want to leave comments on any of the podcasts, I at least keep an eye on the comments that are coming in. And then we'd be very happy to answer questions about pretty much anything, I guess.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about anything, with the disclaimer that I don't know what I'm talking about, maybe. But
I also do not know what I'm talking about.
But hey, you might be entertained by uninformed opinions.
So please do
send us questions
in the comments.
You said observations on travel when you're going through your list.
I
thought that was an interesting thing that you read out.
So that wasn't part of my podcast list. That was part of just notes to myself.
But I like.
But so I made a list. Lessons learned from travel, and I mean this is just a list that I started like a week ago when I landed in Germany.
Okay, but you have some notes then?
Okay. Oh, okay. And I guess some context. So I'm an adult woman who has been most of my life. Well, when I was younger, I used to travel with a backpack. But since then, I've always had the rolly suitcase and everything. And on this trip, I decided I want to try backpacking again because I knew I was going to be catching a lot of trains and it's annoying taking a suitcase. So I had like my old backpacking backpack that I took to Cuba last time, which was well over 10 years ago. But so with that context, the first thing on my list is if you want to backpack, make sure you only have one backpack. Carrying a heavier second pack by hand is miserable.
Yes.
Okay.
Confirm.
Second thing, 2 kilometers is a long way to walk with a backpack.
Confirm.
Unless you have excellent walking shoes with socks.
Yes.
Okay. Always have coins.
That's sort of changing. Oh, in Germany, it's still true, right?
Yeah, Germany, no, that's the thing. Like,
cash is king.
I haven't seen a Canadian coin, also probably in 10 years.
Yeah.
And as soon as I landed here, I needed coins.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But
not everything works with card or even notes. Nope. Sundays in Europe are quiet.
Yes. Well, this is important learning. Sunday is a day off here in Germany, and that means that everything's shut.
Yeah.
Including the supermarkets.
And Ubers.
Everything.
And so then you have to walk more than 2 kilometers with a backpack. If you think you will need Band-Aids, pack a lot of them.
Yes.
No sense running out after the first one.
Indeed.
Because I always do this. I'm like, I'm going to need Band-Aids. Put one Band-Aid
in. One Band-Aid in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next point. You will need Band-Aids.
This is genius. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you leave on your trip wearing heavy clothes, make sure they fit in your luggage after you change into your lighter clothes.
That's also very good advice. Yeah.
Do not rely on luggage lockers to be free at busy train stations.
They are not. No, they are not. And they can be 5-6 euros, but it's a godsend. Like those 5-6 euros will enable you to explore a city for 4 or 5 hours. Otherwise, you won't be able to get into shops. You're absolutely handicapped if you have a big backpack. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it would have been great if I could have gotten one. Yeah. But although later when I came back around like 4 or 5, there was a lot that were empty. It was just earlier in the day. This was Munich.
Okay. Yeah. Bummer.
Okay. Don't trust ChatGPT about which libraries you can work in.
Oof. Yeah.
Double check official website. I caught a cab to a library that didn't seem to exist.
Oh my gosh. Did ChatGPT hallucinate the library?
I think so. But I had a really nice time figuring out what to do in that area. Yeah. And it was away from the downtown. So,
cool.
So it was still good. Like it was a fun adventure. But Always have protein bars in your bag for a conference, especially if you're giving a talk.
Yes. Yeah. Blood sugar levels are hard to manage, especially in conferences, because the organizers have differing views on when a break should take place.
Yes. And also, if they do provide a break, if it's something that's just very carbohydrate based, it can lead to a sugar crash.
Yeah, you can definitely have a crash.
And another one about socks. So, I think I need to pack better shoes. But actually, I can. There's a jumping off point with this giving talks thing, because I don't know if you've ever had this situation, but I've had this 3 times in my life, where I had a blood sugar crash and actually the first 2 times I didn't know what was going on. I eventually figured out the 3rd time. But essentially what happened was I was starting to give a talk, and then my mind just turned into static and I just couldn't like speak. And so the first time this happened was 2010 or no 2011, first year of my first postdoc. I went to visit Josh Coombs in Albuquerque, and I was giving a presentation to the physicists of University of New Mexico. Lots of important, famous people in the audience. And I got up. Actually, this wasn't the first time. This was the second time it happened. But yeah, I got up and just pretty much like froze and didn't. It took me a while to like figure out that I can like start talking. The first time it happened actually was 2008 in Erlangen. But then the last time it happened was probably the worst one. Probably maybe 8 years ago at NRC. I was again giving a talk, and within like 30 seconds, just my mind went blank. And it was a long it would have been like 5 minutes like that it took me to like get my act together. And I was just like, because then you get stressed and worse, and everyone's standing there and like staring at you. And I was just like, I was like mortified. And I think at that point, like it clicked what was going on. And I think even somebody went and got me like a banana or something. But I ate it, and then I gave like a talk, and it was a good talk, and it was fine. And the surprising thing to me is that even after that happened, like nobody, I mean, maybe people were just being like polite or something, but I got the impression, for the full day that I spent afterwards talking to people, it didn't seem to phase anyone. Like nobody, they were just like, oh, okay, she just like had a thing, and then she gave a talk, and she knows what she's talking about. It was just like a problem. And even people that I see afterwards, like nobody has ever through my career treated me differently as a result of this. But when you're going through it, like it's just like, oh my God, my career is over. Like who gets up and just like forgets what they're talking about?
I mean, it's a really interesting topic, actually, and I'm sure we'll come back to it in a future podcast, like on giving talks. And so I think it's super important to be aware or to do good self-care before, during, and after a talk. It's not something that you might pay attention to, but monitoring your blood sugar levels can be critical, because you'll see me, there's videos of me where I'll be giving a lecture or something, and then all of a sudden my hand will go to like a table, and I'll be supporting myself.
Right. Okay. Because you feel like you're going to faint a little.
You won't notice it unless you're looking for it. Who's going to look through 200 videos to find this? But it's there. I promise you, it's really there. Because I didn't have time, because a meeting overran or something like that, and I couldn't eat anything beforehand. And then halfway through the lecture, I'm like, I think I'm going to go down. And then you hold onto the table for support. I have publicly almost fainted and had to stop a talk. Anyone who was in Hamburg in 2011 may remember this. And I had to stop. I was giving it, it was going fine. And then I'm like, I am not feeling well right now. I have to stop, and I had to apologize.
And this was a blood sugar thing as well, you think?
A combination of factors, I would say. But it was avoidable, let's say. And it also, you've got to plan. So it's a thing. It's a thing. It will happen. You're standing up, right? The blood pressures are different. Lots of things are different.
I mean, and like nerves. I mean, even now I get nervous. Right? Like, 20 years later of giving hundreds of talks, I still get like that little bit of a rush, like your heart. And then, 30 seconds into the talk, you're usually fine. But
I mean, if you're not getting nervous, then maybe you should be a bit worried, right? And so just planning a bit your day before a talk, during a talk, and after is not a bad thing. It's super. The more experience you get, the more you sort of you don't pay attention.
So this happens if you're traveling, right? Like, and you're visiting a group, then usually they like book you meetings all day to be talking to all of these different people, and then you don't have time to get a snack. And so I would always, like, if someone is making you a schedule for when you're traveling, make sure that 30 minutes before your scheduled talk, there's nothing booked.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can just have that in an office, to just like collect your thoughts and maybe, take a toilet break or whatever, like all of these things. Because, okay, like for example, let's say you haven't had time to, do these things, then you're like running around quickly trying to do them. And then that can like lead you to get more like worked up.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to come back to this topic in the future about the whole kind of giving talks thing, from preparing, dealing with unexpected eventualities and so on.
Yep.
But I love the travel tips. This is so on the money, right? But I guess I'd add a couple of learnings from traveling as well. Like you traveled light here.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed with this.
I want to aim for better. One backpack next time.
Yeah. And that's my ideal is hand luggage only. You can do it for 3, 4, 5 days, usually in summer. It's easier than winter. Hand luggage only has profound consequences for travel. You really save hours in airports this way, because you don't have to wait at luggage, you don't have to deal with customs the same way, and so on. And so hand luggage only is also super easy to get on trains and off. Your stress levels are lower in general. But then you have to really like evaluate, do I need this thing or do I not need this thing? You'll work it out. After a couple of trips, you know what you didn't use. But traveling, that's the one learning I brought with me. And then also just looking after yourself. It's so easy to do the following thing. You want to save money, because probably you're not getting reimbursed to the full amount that you should be on a trip. You're probably not, let's face it. You're maybe working in an institution or a small company where they don't have a huge travel budget. And you got to travel a bit cheaper in order that you don't get a big loss. And there's this temptation, and it's a big temptation, and I try to advise everyone against this, to like really skimp out on things which would lead to a definite quality of life reduction. So what's an example? You book a flight, a cheaper flight, saves you maybe 50 euros or something, but it's like overnight instead of during the day. Yeah. Right. You think, okay, I don't have to book a hotel, and then I arrive, and then I've saved this money, and then you come and you're trashed. And it's not a holiday, it's a business trip. When you're an academic or in a company and you're giving a talk, this is not a holiday. This is a business trip. And there's a reason why business class was invented for business people, because if you come trashed, then you've just wasted the money. I mean, you not only are you in a bad way, but you've literally wasted the money you spent on the flight anyway. So it hurts, I know, to spend money on these quote marks luxuries, maybe a taxi from the airport instead of waiting 3 hours with trains and so on. These little luxuries hurt, but if they lead to you arriving still functioning versus not functioning, then
I guess you think about this like in the future, are you going to have a job that's paying you 20K a year more as a result of like this
trip,
thing or not? And what will that mean for your retirement savings?
It's a small investment now, which could lead to a huge return later on. So that is a hard lesson to learn, and like I don't think I've learned it really, but the temptation's always there.
Even just to quickly do a diversion on that, even in terms of not thinking about investments in the future, but just understanding yourself better. I started to play this game when I would do things like have an 8-hour layover, to take a cheaper flight. And then when I'm at the airport in the middle of this 8-hour layover, it's like, would I pay an extra $200 not to be here now, to be able to just leave? And it's like, yes,
usually
I would.
The answer is yes.
So next time I'm booking and looking at the flights, I'm like, yeah, probably I would pay that extra $200 not to be in that situation.
It hurts like every time, especially if you have the kind of background that presumably we may share in terms of our upbringings and spending on luxuries. But it's worth it. It's really worth it. Especially remember the following reframing: you're traveling on. It's a business trip. It's not a holiday. The minute you're visiting family and friends and going to the beach, whatever, that's a holiday. Whatever. Yeah, you could skimp there. But on a business trip, I don't want to spend money sending employees to another institution where they can't represent us because they are sick, overwhelmed, or otherwise incapacitated. It's a waste of money. So that's a definite learning.
Yep. Excellent.
So I guess we're kind of winding up. Is that right?
Yeah, I think
I'm getting
got to grab some lunch.
I'm getting all this talk about blood sugar. It actually looks like it's nearly 12:30. So
excellent. I look forward to some more German bread and sausage.
Now I'll try and.
What? No,
Yeah. Are you actually legitimately
no,
looking forward to it?
no.
Yeah.
But I also wasn't being rude. Like
No, it's very entertaining to me because almost everyone complains after a while of visiting here that it's just bread and then more bread. And, yeah, but it is great bread.
This is my problem, is that because usually I don't eat bread in Canada very much, but when I came here I spent a whole week eating bread just because it's so hard to not eat.
Yummy.
And now I'm like, I can't, my body is reacting very badly to
carbs
this.
all the time.
Yeah.
No, we'll find something that's not carbohydrate heavy. That's my hope.
Excellent.
Cool. All right then, I guess this meeting is over. Check 1, 2, chew.
Chew? Why do you say chew?
Chew, so that it blows out the tsetse fly. So these are the sounds that overload the microphones. There's a pa, ba, cha, ta.
But then what are you testing for?
I'm testing that it doesn't go whoop and spike.
Oh, ch, ch, t, pa, pa.
Yeah, exactly.
Pa, ch, Czechoslovakia.
I love it. This is fantastic.